At the beginning of the film, we're taken to a remote town in America and shown a group of locals having a small party. It turns out the party is being held by an old man named Ezra to celebrate his 81st birthday. We're told that Ezra is a former sheriff in the town and that he's very close to the locals. A little later, Ezra calls his son, Jake. In front of everyone, Ezra announces that Jake is now officially the sheriff serving the town. Ezra hopes Jake can continue his career by becoming a great, honest sheriff who is loved by the community. Then one of the locals asks if Jake will be as good as Ezra. Ezra replies that Jake can definitely become even better than him. Besides, Jake is a former Special Forces soldier who has now switched careers and become a police officer.
And nothing happened, and we'll take care of it.
You know, I honestly don't think he knows I'm the sheriff.
Not far from Ezra's house, a single mother with one child is seen teaching her son how to shoot. The woman's name is Cassie, and she's very skilled at long-range shooting. A little later, Jake comes over to see Cassie because it turns out the two of them are getting close. Jake then shows Cassie his shooting skills. Cassie, not wanting to lose, then shows off her skills as well. After that, Jake says goodbye because he has to get to the office soon and is worried it will get too late. After Jake leaves, Cassie goes to Ezra's house, Jake's father, to help him clean up the leftovers from the party. While cleaning up, Cassie accidentally finds Jake's old Marine uniform. This makes Cassie even prouder of Jake. Back to Jake, who has just arrived at the office. There, Jake sees a new prisoner who was arrested for driving over the speed limit. The prisoner also doesn't have a driver's license or an ID, so the man has to be arrested. Jake then tries to ask the prisoner his name and where he's from. However, the man doesn't answer at all and only focuses on reading a book. A little later, Jake's female colleague gets a call saying that a car is stuck in a ravine near an old mine. Hearing the news, Jake's male colleague named Billy volunteers to go check out the scene.
Yep, I will have someone. Broken down SUV was spotted by the O'Cory.
I'll head that way on my way home.
But before Billy leaves, the prisoner warns him not to go because, according to him, it's all just a trap. Billy doesn't believe what the prisoner says and leaves anyway. On the way, Billy calls his wife, who is heavily pregnant. Billy tells his wife that he's currently heading to the scene because there's a car stuck in a ravine. His wife then asks Billy to be careful and come home as soon as he's done with his work.
Okay, that was always okay for me.
I love it.
Back to Jake, who's still at the office and keeps trying to get the prisoner to talk. In various ways, Jake tries to get him to reveal his name and identity. However, the prisoner instead asks Jake to release him immediately. The man says that if he isn't released by tonight, everyone in the police station will be killed. Hearing the threat, Jake doesn't pay any attention to it because he thinks the prisoner is just bluffing. A little later, Cassie comes to see Jake to bring him lunch. Jake is, of course, very grateful to her. After that, the two of them talk for a while outside. From their conversation, it's clear that they both have feelings for each other, but Jake still doesn't have the courage to confess his love. After they finish talking, Cassie says goodbye and heads home, saying that she'll see Jake again later.
Oh, yeah?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Meanwhile, Billy finally arrives at the scene and sees a black car that is stuck. Billy immediately gets out his car and approaches the vehicle. However, after checking it, it turns out there is no one inside the car anymore. Billy then shouts, calling for the owner of the car, just in case the person is still somewhere nearby. Unfortunately, no one answers Billy's calls. Billy then takes out his phone, intending to contact Jake. But suddenly, Billy collapses after being shot in the leg. A little later, a group of mobsters led by a man named Marcus arrives. Marcus then asks Billy to tell him how many people are guarding the police station. Billy finally reveals that there are only 3 people on duty because the others are on leave. Before leaving, Marcus destroys Billy's phone and then leaves him there helpless.
Here's how many of you deputies there are. Nice boots.
Back to Jake, who finally manages to get information about the prisoner at his office. It turns out the prisoner's name is Matheson, and he is a member of Marcus's mob. However, Matheson has repented over the past week. In fact, Matheson has reported all of Marcus's crimes in his hometown and is willing to testify in court later. Since his identity has already been revealed, Matheson finally agrees to tell Jake everything. Matheson begs to be released immediately because sooner or later, Marcus will come looking for him. According to Matheson, if Marcus comes to the town, there will be major chaos that will cause many casualties. Unfortunately, Jake can't simply release Matheson because he has to get permission from headquarters first. Next, Jake orders his female colleague to contact Billy because there has been no word from him. However, Billy can't be reached, which makes Jake start to have a bad feeling. Jake then orders his colleague to ask the FBI for help, while he goes to the scene himself to look for Billy.
I'm hungry.
He said, don't talk to me.
On the other hand, Marcus and his men arrive at a small gas station. They brutally kill the owner of the gas station, then fill up their vehicles with free fuel.
How are you?
Back to Ezra, Jake's father, who now arrives at a restaurant for lunch. When he walks inside, Cassie is also there because she happens to work at the restaurant. Cassie welcomes Ezra warmly, and the two of them start talking. During their conversation, Cassie keeps asking about Jake until Ezra finally realizes that Cassie has fallen in love with his son. Even though Cassie is a single mother with one child, Ezra doesn't mind at all. In fact, Ezra fully approves of Cassie's relationship with Jake. Not long after that, Marcus and his friends arrive at the restaurant. When he sees Marcus, Ezra immediately gets a bad feeling because no one like Marcus has ever come to town before. Marcus, feeling uncomfortable because Ezra keeps watching him, finally approaches Ezra and asks why he's staring at him. Ezra says it's nothing. He just finds it strange that someone like Marcus would come to such a remote town. Marcus then asks if there's something wrong with that. However, Ezra doesn't answer and chooses to leave.
For me, if you like, if there's any trouble.
The scene returns to Jake, who is still on his way to find Billy. A little later, Jake arrives at the location. However, Jake doesn't find anyone there. Even Billy's car is already gone. When Jake is about to leave, he suddenly hears a groaning sound from behind some bushes. Jake immediately approaches the source of the sound and is shocked to see that Billy is already dying. Jake asks Billy to hold on because he's going to take him to the hospital right away. But Billy refuses and asks Jake to take care of his wife and child instead. Billy also tells him that a group of mobsters is heading to the police station to find Matheson, the prisoner, and that they are an extremely ruthless group. Not long after that, Billy takes his last breath after losing too much blood. Jake can only remain silent while holding back his tears. On the way back to the police station, Jake contacts the FBI to ask for help. Jake explains that there's a prisoner named Matheson being hunted by a group of mobsters, and that the group is now heading to the police station. The FBI chief says they will send help immediately. However, Jake is told to hold out for now and not release Matheson. After the call ends, the FBI chief contacts someone else and says that Matheson definitely won't be able to escape. It turns out the person he contacted is Marcus. Apparently, Marcus has always been getting help from the corrupt FBI chief. Back to Ezra, Jake's father, who is still outside the restaurant. There, Ezra meets one of Marcus's men who is standing guard outside. Ezra then asks what they're actually doing in the town because he knows very well that they're not good people. Marcus's man replies that they're just sightseeing and asks if that's not allowed. Ezra then gives them a slight warning, saying that if they cause trouble in the town, he'll personally come after them and arrest them all. Meanwhile, Marcus approaches the restaurant owner to ask who the sheriff in town is. Cassie has already gone home because her shift is over. The frightened restaurant owner chooses not to answer Marcus's question and instead calls his male cook. The cook tells Marcus to pay for his meal and leave the restaurant immediately. At first, Marcus just smiles and says that the cook looks pretty intimidating. But after the cook pulls out a weapon, Marcus decides to pay and leave the restaurant.
Get walking. Friends are waiting for you outside.
A little later, Marcus comes back with his men, fully armed. They immediately kill the cook who threatened Marcus earlier, along with all the customers inside.
Now. And the night. Wicked has enclosed me. And all my bones are out of...
Luckily, Marcus doesn't kill the restaurant owner because the man is old and reminds him of his mother. Back at the police station, Jake's colleague Sharon looks very panicked after finding out that Billy has been killed. Hearing the news, Matheson insists that Marcus must be responsible and that Marcus is now heading there. Matheson again asks to be released before anyone else becomes a victim. However, Sharon still chooses not to release him, especially since Jake had previously told her not to release Matheson under any circumstances. Sharon even points her gun at Matheson and tells him to stop talking. At the same time, Ezra, Jake's father, arrives at the police station. Ezra immediately tries to calm Sharon down and asks her to lower her gun. Fortunately, Ezra manages to calm Sharon down. After that, Ezra looks at the data on the computer, showing Marcus's photo as a ruthless Mafia boss. Upon learning this, Ezra also panics because Marcus is already in town and had previously eaten at the restaurant. However, Ezra still doesn't know that Marcus has massacred the people who were at the restaurant earlier. A little later, Jake arrives with his hands covered in blood. Seeing Jake's condition, Ezra immediately asks what happened. Jake then explains that Billy, his colleague, has just been killed. Things are now extremely urgent, while the FBI still hasn't arrived. Jake plans to move Matheson to his ranch because Marcus will be arriving soon to look for Matheson.
Control the terrain.
What about this guy?
We're taking him. Put your hands behind your back.
At the same time, Cassie arrives and says that she wants to go with Jake. However, Jake tells her she can't because the situation will be extremely dangerous. In the end, Jake leaves with Matheson and takes him to the ranch, while Cassie and Ezra are told to go home. Meanwhile, Jake assigns Sharon to stay at the police station. If help arrives, Sharon can immediately direct them to the ranch. After Jake leaves, Cassie instead asks Ezra to follow Jake because she's worried about Jake being there alone. As a father, Ezra naturally agrees. In the end, the two of them leave to follow Jake to the ranch. Back to Sharon, who is now alone at the police station. A little later, Sharon gets a call from the restaurant owner, who tells her that the restaurant has been destroyed and the people there were massacred by Marcus. Hearing the news, Sharon immediately panics because Marcus turns out to be extremely ruthless. At the same time, Marcus and his men arrive and immediately break into the station. Luckily, Sharon manages to hide under a desk, so Marcus doesn't find her. Marcus looks very disappointed when he sees that the police station is empty and Matheson isn't there. However, as Marcus and his men are about to leave, Sharon accidentally makes a sound, revealing her location. Marcus then forces Sharon to tell him where Matheson is now. Out of fear, Sharon finally tells him that Jake has taken Matheson to the ranch. After getting the information, Marcus brutally kills Sharon and then leaves with his group to follow them to the ranch. Back to Jake, who has now arrived at the ranch. Jake immediately takes Matheson to the bathroom and keeps him there. Meanwhile, Marcus is seen on his way to the ranch. As Jake is about to go outside to prepare his next plan, he's shocked to see that Ezra and Cassie have followed him there. Jake gets angry and asks why they came because the situation there will be extremely dangerous. Cassie replies that leaving Jake alone would actually be more dangerous. That's why she and Ezra came to help. Since there's no time to argue, Jake simply stays quiet and brings him inside. Having a feeling that the group of mobsters will arrive soon, Jake immediately prepares the weapons, especially since his female colleague at the station can no longer be reached. Cassie, who is skilled at long-range shooting, immediately gets her sniper rifle ready and takes up position to shoot from a distance. After that, Ezra takes a moment to talk to Jake privately. Ezra tells Jake that once all of this is over, he should get closer to Cassie and make her his wife. Ezra knows that the two of them love each other, and he fully approves of their relationship. Jake doesn't give an answer and says he'll think about it later. Then Matheson begs Jake to release him because he wants to help fight Marcus. However, Jake refuses because he can't simply trust Matheson, especially since Matheson is a former member of the Mafia.
Come on, he'd put a bullet in.
A little later, Jake goes outside to set up some traps. After a while, Marcus and his men finally arrive, so Jake and the others immediately get ready. One of Marcus's men immediately walks inside without knowing that traps have already been set there, and suddenly... After that, Marcus launches an attack, and a shootout breaks out. In the middle of the battle, Marcus speaks through the police loudspeaker. Marcus asks Jake to hand over Matheson and promises that he won't bother them anymore. However, Jake refuses his demand and chooses to keep fighting.
And slowly.
Cassie.
There's a gas tank across the road.
Jake, Cassie, and Ezra manage to take out Marcus's men until Marcus is the only one left. Realizing that all his men have been killed, Marcus starts to panic, but he still tries to attack. A little later, Matheson manages to escape from his confinement and goes downstairs. Unfortunately, Matheson runs into Marcus, and the two immediately shoot at each other. In the incident, Matheson collapses, while Marcus is still able to stand.
That I would use all the influence at my disposal, stabbing me in the back!
But as God is my witness.
At the same time, Jake arrives and immediately points his gun at Marcus. However, it turns out that one of Marcus's men is still alive and now points his gun at Jake. Luckily, Matheson, who is apparently still alive, is able to take out Marcus's man. After that, Jake immediately kills Marcus. Meanwhile, Matheson eventually dies because the gunshot wound he previously suffered from Marcus is already too severe. Jake has now managed to take out the entire group of ruthless mobsters who attacked his town. This naturally makes Ezra and Cassie even prouder of him. At the end of the film, the locals are shown starting to arrive with the intention of helping. However, since all the enemies have already been killed, they are amazed by Jake, who has only been sheriff for a day, but has already managed to take out the mobsters. The end.